This is from Alex. There's lots of sympathy going around for players like Rodri and Bernardo Silva lamenting the expanded football schedule. But both signed contract extensions with Manchester City after the expanded Champions League format was announced. If they're not comfortable with the amount of time travelling and playing, the option is there to sign for clubs that are unlikely to be playing in Europe. In any other line of work, if you want to reach the top of your field and reach the highest pay grade, you'll be expected to work more hours. And if you don't like it, you don't take the position. No one is forcing these players to play in the Champions League. They should stop complaining about doing something they overtly agreed to do, with full knowledge of what the workload would be and gladly accepted millions of pounds for. Now, Luke, you and I discussed the possibility of players striking on Wednesday night, because it's something that Rodri mentioned. And it's a lot of listeners got in touch with us saying that actually they disagreed with what we were saying. We also had an interesting comment on our YouTube channel in response to this as well from Minister Man Dan, who said this: "This is such a stupid thing. No rank and file players are going to give up paychecks because the top 1% of players are playing too many games. That's not how unions work. Unions take action based on what the majority of the union members want, not what 20 guys who make the most money in the membership want. People like Rodri need to get a grip." So, it's a big talking point at the moment. A lot of people, let's be honest, are pretty pissed off with what Rodri was saying.
Yeah, look, I think... We talked about this actually at length on this week's Ask OTC, which came out yesterday, because this is not just Rodri. And I'm not talking about the strike itself or the potential strike itself, but the sense that there is a tipping point coming. And it's always felt like the Club World Cup would be this tipping point. Now, we've been reading the last couple of days that Gianni Infantino has called an emergency meeting of broadcasters because there is not one broadcast deal for the Club World Cup.
Blimey.
Now, the Club World Cup, if we look at it in isolation, not as part of the calendar at the moment and not as a calendar challenge, which it's sort of becoming a flag bearer for, if you look at the Club World Cup and forget all the other demands on players and just on the football, it should be something that's really great for football, actually. Something that's not completely Eurocentric. You know, a really satisfying tournament where we find out what the best club team in the world is. It's being played in the States. There's loads of exciting aspects about it. To have got to a point less than a year before it happens where they went a couple of weeks ago, oh, and here's the logo for it. Not... here's the stadiums, here's the schedule, here's the TV deal, here's how you can buy tickets, all of that stuff. What does that tell you about it? It tells you that there's no appetite for it, not just for the players, but actually from the people who want to flog the dead horse, from the people who want to put football on every waking moment of the day. I think, let's get into the players bit of it in a moment, but as I mentioned on Ask OTC, and if you haven't downloaded it, please do, I think we should start voting for ourselves as fans. I think the football authorities really want us to be polarised as players and fans. Like, they're the remote millionaires who don't understand what it's like to get up at 5 a.m. to go to work, who don't understand what it's like to get minimum wage, or don't understand what it's like to get paid a fraction of what these guys do. They should just be grateful and get on with it. Well, we'll come to the rights of the players and all that sort of stuff in a minute. The fact is, however much you are paid, it is clear to anyone who watches top-level football over the last couple of years, and particularly since COVID, that the level of consistency and the level of consistent quality is worse and worse and worse. Now, what does that mean for us as paying fans? Paying fans who pay an increasing amount to get into stadiums, who pay an increasing amount on an increasing amount of subscriptions for TV football. And, you know, we touched on it on the Ramble yesterday. Watching football on TV is an expensive business. Like, when I was at school, you could easily win a football argument by going, do you go to the game? No. Okay, your opinion doesn't count anymore. That's no longer the case. Not only because people are able to watch television, all their team's games from the comfort, or most of their team's games from the comfort of their own home, but because for a lot of people, it's been too expensive to go to football for a long time. Are we getting what we pay for? No.
Well, hang on. So a point that I want to ask you about there, Andy, is that you said the quality at the top or the quality is getting worse, and you said it's obvious to people. Is that obvious to people, though?
It should be. It should be.
Can you clarify that a little bit more?
If you watch the Euros, you are watching a load of absolutely cooked players who really need a holiday.
Certainly when you're watching the England players. but I'm backing you up.
All the best teams.
That's every time.
No, but I'm saying that
the best
Bellingham
teams
and Kane. Well, Kane's slightly.
And even if we want to break it down really simply to minutes played at high intensity, people will turn around and go, oh well, why couldn't France and Portugal and England do it when Spain could do it? Look at the amount of minutes comparatively to say Kane and Bellingham that Lamine Yamal and Nico Williams played. They played like 30% less minutes at a lower intensity because they're not in a team that has to win all the time.
It did occur to me.
That is the most basic thing. Yeah. I don't think you can do it as simply as break it down to minutes. I think there's a lot more to it.
Well, I think it did occur to me actually that in future tournaments, actually the team may not be picked on the best players. It may be on who's freshest and all that. But I suppose you could argue that that's always been the case. Luke, we spoke about this, of course, on Wednesday night on Ramble Reacts, which people would have maybe had a chance to listen to.
Every single one of them would have heard it.
On Thursday, yeah.
For sure. If they know what's good for him, or I'm going on fucking strike.
So the reaction to little old us has been clear, but with the comments. But the reaction to Rodri, of course, we're talking about, and one or two other players saying this. Has this made you rethink what you said? Because basically on Wednesday, we were kind of taking Rodri's position and sympathising with him and saying that players are perhaps overworked and so on. Has this made you rethink it, or are you doubling down?
Not really, because I think that, I'm going to hopefully do neither, because I don't want to be seen to be so kind of dogmatic that I can't be nuanced about it. I feel, first of all, I'd echo Andy's comments, I think it's spot on. I feel like the fundamental argument that football is good and people like it, so there should always be as much of it as possible, is, not even necessarily wrong. It's just uninformed, because you are used to watching the protagonist of that sport as almost like a one-dimensional performer of something that you like, rather than as a human being. And I always get kind of put in the mind of, I went to interview Will Hughes once, midfield player for Watford and Crystal Palace. I'm sure it's still available probably. I can't remember if this made the final edit, but anyway, he made a point where he said, everyone thinks they want to be a footballer, and I'm telling you now they don't. And I said, what do you mean by that? And he said, when someone says they want to be a professional footballer, what they actually mean is, I want to score the winning goal in the FA Cup final, or I want to win a World Cup. And that is 0.001% of what a very fractional, small amount of players anyway ever get to achieve. Yeah. I'll tell you what being a footballer is. It's about travelling on someone else's schedule all year. It's about not really being in charge of making your own decisions. It's about doing all this other stuff. And I'm paraphrasing him there, and he wasn't complaining. Very nice man, very happy to be a footballer, all the rest of it. But I think the fundamental problem with these arguments, and there are some good points. I mean, the YouTube comment, Minister Mandan, he makes some interesting comments there, which I'll come on to in a minute. So I don't think it's cut and dried, and he's right, he's wrong, and I'm right, or vice versa.
There's a few bits to pick through here,
Yeah, but what I do think is that, these are human beings that are playing a sport that they can only play for a certain amount of time, a week or a month or a year or whatever. And if they're inspired and forced to come out and say things like this, there's probably a reason for it. And I would also say the authorities and the people who make decisions at the top of the game, they seem to make the decisions they want to make based on entirely wrong reasons. And let me give you an example. It was identified and accepted that the previous format of the Champions League, there were quote unquote too many games that didn't mean much. There was too many dead rubbers. And
yes, that's one of the reasons why they changed the format. Yeah,
normal people would probably have gone, "It's probably too many teams in it then."
Yeah,
right. It's probably too much going on. Why don't you just? They don't seem to ever be able to unring the bell. And what I mean by that is, once it's out there, they never seem to take a step back. For any reason other than the price of everything and the value of nothing. Club World Cup's a great example of this. There will need to be a tipping point. Maybe it'll be that. Maybe the Club World Cup will become a massive white elephant. It won't make any money. It'll be a disaster. Someone at the top will end up losing their job about it, and the whole thing will be rolled back a bit. That's the only way you can see this happening. And then on the union thing, which I talked about, we have to get into the detail here. So Minister Mandan's comments are interesting. I totally understand his point of view. He does put a bit more detail on the on how unions work, which is, I'm grateful for. But of course, there are different unions. There's the PFA, there's FIFPro, there's different unions around different parts of Europe and the wider world as well. So of course, it's going to be a big undertaking. But if a load of top players say, almost in a wildcat strike way, we're not fucking playing. It's as simple as that. We are not going to play. Yeah. I don't think it's necessarily going to be a case of all the PFA members in League Two agreeing and saying, well, I'll give up my salary because you guys don't, you guys are a bit tired. We can all boil it down to that really basic level. Yeah. Clearly, that's not going to happen. So I accept that point, and maybe I didn't make it clear enough on Wednesday. But I'm telling you now, if it gets to a tipping point and even 30 or 40% of the top Champions League players say enough is enough, we're not playing next week, something will change. And that's why the motivation is there, because they are looking at it and they're going, no one else is listening to us or giving us any support. And Andy's point about the quality of the games is totally true. Like, it's completely true. You can see it. I mean, it may not be front of mind right now because we're at the start of the season, but it is still quite prevalent, and it will be far more prevalent come the new year. Yeah.
I mean, and to add to that unions thing, it does remind me a little bit of the actors' strike that's been going on for a few years in Hollywood. I won't bore you with the details of that, but I kind of get it a little bit, but how many actors are there out there that are part of unions and all the rest of it? Yet if your top 10 Hollywood stars or your top 15 or whatever go, we're not doing this, they're the ones that are obviously going to be listened to the most, because they're the ones that make the most money, etc., etc. So everyone kind of has to follow suit. And if Rodri says we go on strike, I don't think Man City are going to go, well, we'll buy a load of League One players. It's just, again, it's not how it kind of works, really.
There's going to end up, and I said this on Wednesday, I'll say it again, it'd be good to get Andy's take on it. You're just going to get different squads for different competitions. Well, you're going to get different amounts of players. It'll be like NFL.
Chelsea have started fashioning that already, haven't they?
So there is a point there, actually, to be fair, that a side like Man City, so going back to Alex, he's saying, well, if you're not comfortable with this, then don't play in the Champions League or whatever, or don't do it. Now, there's probably stuff written into contracts that we're unaware of, where they may well kind of have to if they're deemed to be fit and so on. But without kind of getting too speculative about it, do you think that the big clubs like Man City and Chelsea and so on, who can afford massive squads, and they have got big squads, loads of quality, do you think to yourself, well, okay, sorry lads, but you if you keep winning competitions, you keep doing this, you've got money, you've got this, that and the other, then you don't play Rodri for 15 games a season, play one of your other really, really good players in there. Do you think that this is just a problem that the big clubs, because they're the ones that will suffer with it because they're deep in tournaments, do you think this is just a problem that they have to solve?
But what Luke was talking about different squads for different competitions, I can understand the idea. It becomes incredibly commercially problematic.
Definitely.
And it's something that's happened in the NBA, for example.
It's happened in the Premier League. Mick McCarthy got fined for it.
Yeah. And I think if you look at, say, what they've done in the NBA, they've tried to tighten the rules of leaving players out for, like, especially televised fixtures. It becomes harder to leave players out for nationally televised fixtures. And I think the players turn around and go quite reasonably, well, there are 82 regular season games and now you've added a bloody cup to it, which I think is fair enough. The amount that they get paid that really has nothing to do with what they are physically able to produce, that there is a limit. And also, I see a lot of Alex's points, but I do think the idea that players totally know what they're getting into at the beginning, that they really don't. And I think as well, you can't know what it's like until you're in it. And I think, as Luke was saying, going back to the Will Hughes point, there's an innate misunderstanding of, like, how much they give up. Does that mean they deserve to be paid, like, several thousand times more than the rest of us? That's not really the question, is it?
You're battling against free market capitalism. Yeah, do you know what I mean? Exactly. That's literally what you're battling against.
Exactly. The question is, what are they able to give? And because they're, it comes down to, do you think they should be fair game for whatever, just because they're, as barely humans, as just there for our entertainment, because they're paid an extraordinary amount of money? And I don't think you can know what it's like at the beginning. And it's a bit like fame. If you'd have said to David Beckham, this is what your life is going to be like, you're not going to be able to walk to the shop and do your own shopping. Like, the thing is, once you're in it, you can't take it back, can you?
honest.
Pop stars say this kind of thing, don't they? Actors, you know,
No human can know.
Yeah, exactly. But
Also,
also, but the point that Alex says about in any line of work, if you want to reach the top of the field, you've got to be expected to do this, and that. I mean, I might say that is a bit of a shame, actually. But anyway, that's a different point. But no one's forcing these players to play. They should stop playing. And the idea that, well, if they're not comfortable, then go and sign for a different club. I mean, it's just not as simple as that.
The question is, like, what does that mean? Like, are those who signed contracts before the reformatting of the Champions League?
Well, you get into, and also as well, the fact is that if you're a player, you're getting a certain amount of money and so on. Man City are not going to go, you don't fancy it, Rodri? Okay, well, who wants to buy him? He's worth this amount of money, and all the European clubs and all we can't afford that.
I suppose what you could say, though, I mean, and I've touched on this before. If you look at, say, the Julian Alvarez deal, I don't think he's a player that City were absolutely out on. Do I think he's a player that they thought he's just played 77 games plus the Olympics and he's played an 11-month season, which is ridiculous by any standards?
Yes,
I think we can all get on board with that is not good for anyone, spectators or players. But I think they definitely thought, we've got this offer from Atletico, we've got the Club World Cup at the end of this season, let's just cash out.
I think what, you haven't really changed your opinion too much, Luke, although you've taken into account what you're saying, but it's still that element. Andy, I think you're kind of saying the same thing. You hear what people are saying. People can be a little bit, I'm not saying Alex and Minister Man Dan are saying this, but you get some broadcasters and some tabloids who could be very tub-thumpy about this. Oh, shut up and get on with it. And I just find that just total bollocks.
It's exactly related to the idea of, mental health. People's mental health needs to be protected. This is the extension of that. It's very all this stuff is linked.
But people used to say that about Paul Gascoigne in the 90s. He was on 15 grand a week.
30 years ago.
Yeah, people.
We've moved on. That's my point. Stan Collymore as well. They said the same thing about Stan Collymore.
Yeah, John Gregory said it about Stan Collymore.
My point is people haven't moved on when they're talking about this for some reason.
Yeah, and that's the thing is that we said that now, and then you kind of look back at it and you think that looks particularly bad, those kind of points about shut up and get on with it. So there we are. Well, look, thank you for your engagement on that. You may still disagree with us, and ultimately it's, Rodri and so on, but we appreciate you engaging with it.
For sure.
And it is a debate that will probably go on and on and on.
Yeah.
Until something moves. Something a little bit lighter, Andy, you've got the next question.
You've got one from Go Away Tim on Instagram. Which player that never played in the Prem would have been a perfect fit?
I read that question and immediately he leapt to mine. He scored a lot of goals in Serie A, but immediately, I don't know what I thought of Filippo Inzaghi.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, my answer to this question always has been and always will be the original Ronaldo. Perfectly suited.
I mean, any league in the world.
Yeah, but just perfectly suited. And I think if you think about... Cristiano Ronaldo and Lionel Messi have come along, and they're they suck in all the oxygen, all the gravity about who the best players ever and all this kind of stuff were. But Ronaldo was the original Ronaldo was just, it was incredible to watch in the era that he was, and he had everything to be perfectly suited to, as you've said, every league. But the Premier League was the league and is the league, and it would have been great to see him in.
If I may say, I think that's a slight cop out, because basically you've just named a player who would be bloody excellent anywhere. It's like particularly though the Premier League.
Isn't it funny though that
I think the original Ronaldo is perfectly suited to the Premier League. That's the point.
Isn't the interesting thing straight away that we've all gone for strikers? Because I would go for Vedat Muriqi, who plays for Mallorca. Kosovan striker, absolute tank, brilliant in the air. You see, I would have said Nicholas Füllkrug like 6 months ago.
But now you've seen him play.
But I thought Inzaghi in the sort of the late 90s, around then when
before VAR existed.
Before VAR, but also like that fox in the box. I mean, again, he scored a lot of goals in Serie A, but how much did we love those strikers? Your Robbie Fowlers, just getting on the end of stuff, finishing and so on. He'd have been great. The other one I thought of, although he did pretty well because he did win a treble, though he wasn't a starter, was a proper old-fashioned kind of bruising centre half, and a sort of Marco Materazzi in the Prem. Although actually
he played
did play in these, but Walter Samuel as well.
Cannavaro would be one. Fabio Cannavaro,
too small. Too small, mate.
Yeah,
too small.
Those long throw-ins from Stoke, Andy. He'd have got bullied.
I like Cannavaro.
I don't care if he was a World Cup winner.
One of my favourite ever centre-backs, Cannavaro.
Yeah. All right, coming up after the break, we're going to be talking about the current crop of best managers and who the next crop might be. And we're going to talk about some notable eggs as well. See you in a moment. Welcome back to the mailbag, everybody. Right, this from Chris B95 on the Discord. The current crop of big/best managers, I think most would say, are Klopp, Pep and Ancelotti. Who do you think will be the next best and big managers? I'd say Arteta could get to that status. But any other names who could progress there? Surely Xabi Alonso's an easy one.
Yeah, he's the obvious one, but he's the obvious one for reasons that people might not fully absorb. Because I think what makes me think that he's the real deal is not just what Leverkusen were able to do last season, which is an extraordinary historical season, winning the double, of course, but it's the fact that he takes over a team that's in the relegation zone. And I went to speak to him probably about November last year, and he explained in detail how he had this plan for different stages. So, he just, at the beginning, we've got to play the sort of football that makes us compete in games. Then we can counter more effectively.
Yeah.
And then we get a bit further down the line and we get to the sort of football that can dominate games. And now he's evolving it again a little bit. Now, I think when you have great young managers who come into the game and are very successful, a frequent unifying point is the first time they have some sort of knockback.
Yes.
They don't really know how to deal with it because everything's gone so well so far. But I think you can already see, if you look at it in detail and if you followed Leverkusen closely from the beginning of when he took over, that there are clear, defined eras already within the one era of Xabi Alonso. So that suggests to me that he can be adaptable, he can deal with pressure. You look at the way he manages his career as well. And remember, he got offered the Borussia Mönchengladbach job a year before Leverkusen. It looked like that would be a good opportunity for him, and he'd be on for that. And he's like, you know what? I'm not ready. I'm going to continue here where I am. The fact that he took his time at Real Sociedad's B team. So I think that adaptability that will help him to go on is already there. Also, going back to Chris B95's actual question, I think we also have to make the definition between Klopp and Guardiola and Ancelotti, because when we're making these sort of predictions, I think the other thing we have to say about, say, Ancelotti, for example, he is someone who, to predict what he's done,
incredible,
is absolutely impossible. Because if you go back 20 years...
It's back to the noughties, you'd think that would be his heyday.
Yeah, if you go back... exactly. You go back 20 years and you think you already know what he is. He's a great manager. What you can never imagine, and why he's so different from other managers / head coaches, is he continues developing all the way through his 50s and into his 60s.
Yeah.
And it's difficult to think of any other coach who's taken on a load of different jobs and done that and brought something to each of them.
Ferguson did that a bit in terms of adaptability, but he obviously was still at the one club, which is still impressive. I'm not taking anything away, but Ancelotti, absolutely. Any names from you, Luke, that leap to mind?
Sam Allardyce, I'd say.
No, you see, you've buggered that up. No, I'm going to give you a name.
Go on.
Wayne Rooney.
Yeah, possibly.
There you go.
The jury's still out. I won't be holding my breath too long for that.
We could talk about Arne Slot, though.
Let me answer the question. Maybe I will talk about Arne Slot.
Well, don't say Sam Allardyce then.
Just a little bit of light-heartedness after Andy's deep dive.
Okay.
Just a bit of light and shade.
Please.
That's all it is.
Yeah.
If you have a horror movie, if you like moments
Pick
as well.
someone under 50.
Well, Arne Slot's 46, so he could be on. Look, my feeling is, and Andy's touched on it a bit there, my feeling is there's a few things you need that maybe people don't particularly fully appreciate when you want to become a manager who's pretty successful over an elongated period of time. One is the fact that the game always moves on. It always moves on. There's always innovation. There's always things that happen that you've got to be able to react to and deal with, etc., etc. You could possibly argue, although I don't want to necessarily open this can of worms right now, but you could argue that perhaps Mourinho's fallen foul of that. He had his time, and some people kind of posit the idea that it's very difficult to be a top manager for longer than about 10 years.
That's right, yeah.
The other thing I would also say, Andy touched on it there with Alonso, which I think is super important, is being good at not just coaching, managing and dealing with the press and all that kind of other stuff, but actually being good at choosing your jobs. If you choose jobs badly and you are kind of unconfident or undermined by the fact that you feel like you just need to be in work, I think it can spiral and it can snowball badly.
Oh, big time.
And you can go into a position where you've come from somewhere of great promise to be somewhere badly. I think Arne Slot's the most exciting one. Xabi Alonso's a really exciting one as well. The things that kind of really unify the top ones, I think, are the fact that they are able to adapt, can pick jobs well, and seem to be quite thoughtful. And these days, I think that's important.
Could I throw a name at you and say Thiago Motta? You think about what it was like.
I love that.
But obviously, what he's done at Bologna, getting them into the Champions League.
Yeah.
It's a good start. I mean, we've seen managers do this and then it's not quite happened. But Italy is such a great place to cut your teeth as a manager because they tend to be offered bigger jobs, and that's not as like some sort of the foreigners get the big Premier League job. I don't mean it like that. As in the coaching. The schooling they get is of such quality, and every game is like a game of chess and all this kind of stuff. I think for him, like he would have learned so much.
But I think in very different situations as well. We've seen him in the early stages. We talked about it on this week's OTC. He's applied a lot of those methods very successfully at Juventus already. You know, they look very promising. And bear in mind, he's been fated really the same as Xabi Alonso. He's been fated from a very early point. So before they appointed Luis Enrique, PSG strongly considered appointing Thiago Motta, who of course played for them for a very long time. Yeah, I think he's got it.
We'll find if we move too soon to a big club, but I would be...
He's already at a big club, to be fair.
That's what I'm talking about. We'll find out soon enough.
Oh, yeah.
Marcus is right. Yeah.
Surely, I misheard what you said. I also think he's tactically very innovative, which is important, but then you do get an element which has got to warn against as well, where a lot of these really tactically innovative coaches sometimes find it hard to get out of their own way a bit. Bielsa would be like that. Guardiola used to have a little bit about it.
Russell
Martin is a classic example.
But then he could be, if he surprises us all. Yeah. It would be nice to see him there. We're going to move on, but before we do, I'm going to really annoy Andy because I'm not going to let him talk about him. Ruben Amorim. Okay, next question.
This is from Michael on the Discord. If you could choose one of the bald managers out of the bountiful Premier League egg carton and swap their shiny dome for the hair of one of their players, then which manager and player are you choosing? I've got a couple just to kick you off with. I thought about this and I thought I'd bloody love to see Anthony's hair on Erik ten Hag. And I'd also love to see Virgil van Dijk's hair on Arne Slot.
I'd like to see Joshua Zirkzee hair on Erik ten Hag.
Very good as well. That'd be great. He would look basically exactly like Sideshow Bob.
A little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, personally, I think Arne Slot could work towards having Virgil van Dijk's hair. I mean, what I would like is him to start off with sort of fuzzy peach hair from Mo Salah.
Yeah.
And then gradually work his way towards it.
But do we have any confirmation on what Arne Slot's hair type is? Is it curly? Is it straight? What is it?
I don't know.
We've never seen it.
No.
I don't think anybody has.
No.
I'm not sure even he has as well.
What about you, Marcus?
Well, I said Zirkzee's on
good.
on Erik ten Hag, of course. And then I was trying to think about Enzo Maresca.
Yeah.
See who would be a good fit for him.
I think the crucial thing here is to give the oldest bald manager possible the youngest haircut.
Yes.
So what about Pep Guardiola with Kevin De Bruyne's post-injury Snake from The Simpsons
Like
hair?
it.
Nice.
Like
He'd look really very much like he's about to announce the reforming of a boy band he was in the 90s. I'll be all for that.
That's not too bad at all.
Yeah.
And I mean, maybe I was trying to think of Nuno as well. Who could? Because you want to try and remember all the eggs.
Yeah.
I think not just the top ones.
True. So you want to remember the medium eggs.
Yeah.
You don't want to talk about the Burford Browns. You want to be talking about, some eggs still come from caged hens. A disgrace in my view, but it does happen.
Do they really?
So Nuno might well be an egg from a caged hen. Based on his Spurs performance, for example.
Yes. That's true. Yeah. I mean, maybe I suppose there's nothing too outrageous off the top of my head in that in that squad, but maybe Nuno with James Ward-Prowse's side parting. And
I think going back to Arne Slot being an egg, by the way, Big Pav, a friend of the show, Big Pav, who was at the Palladium last night, he was delighted when Arne Slot came to the Premier League because he got all the lookalikes for him, which replaced the lookalike he used to get, which was disgraced ex-darts player Ted Hankey, who got busted for sexual assault. So for him, it worked very well because Arne Slot's at least a credible, kind of exciting young bald man.
That's right, yeah.
Young, mid-40s, same age as Pav, really.
But yeah, I mean, in terms of managers, though, fairly.
So I don't think we can underestimate the contribution he's made to English football already.
No more Hankey, but plenty of slots.
Plenty of slots, exactly.
Thank you for watching a clip from the Football Ramble podcast. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss an upload. A single upload. Don't miss out on the uploads. The uploads are in